Hal Roberts. This is Bridge City News. Here's some of the top stories we've been following. Alberta Premier Jason Kenney learns his fate today as results from the UCP leadership vote slowly make their way in. The province announces that construction will begin on a new Lethbridge Recovery Centre. BCN's Angela Stewart will have the details. And investigators discover a long tunnel between San Diego and Tijuana that was built by drug dealers to smuggle cocaine between Mexico and the United States.
Your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News with Hal Roberts.
Thanks so much for joining us. Alberta Premier Jason Kenney is stepping down as party leader of the UCP. This follows the results of the leadership review, which came in, and with Kenney only receiving 51.4% of support from party members, he said it was time for a change. Close to 34,300 votes were cast. Now, originally, Kenney said he would potentially remain on as UCP leader with 50 plus 1% support, but he had a change of heart.
I'm sorry, but friends, I truly believe that we need to move forward united. We need to put the past behind us. And our members, a large number of our members, have asked for an opportunity to clear the air through a leadership election. And I've recommended, therefore, that the provincial board schedule a leadership election in a timely fashion.
Premier Kenney was in Washington, D.C. recently preaching the good news about Alberta's energy sector, in particular our oil and gas sector. Now, when it comes to energy, nuclear energy may be the best way to go. That's according to Dr. Cal Beisner, national spokesperson with the conservative Christian policy group Cornwall Alliance. Dr. Beisner says the challenge with nuclear power, however, is that you have to get environmentalists on board.
Nuclear is far and away the safest energy source that we have, and it's the cleanest energy source that we have, with the possible exception of run-of-river hydro. And that could make a difference. The problem is you're going to have a huge change in the attitude of the environmentalist movement toward nuclear to do that. Barring that, fossil fuels are going to continue to be the primary energy source for the world for at least the next 50 or 60 years, probably the next 100 years or more.
Catch the full interview with Dr. Beisner with the Cornwall Alliance and BCN's Jeanette Rocher coming up after Business News. You know, consumers are really feeling the pinch of the pumps right now. Gas prices have shot up just over 36% year over year in April. Prices for almost everything at grocery stores have also gone up. Stats Canada says inflation is now at 6.8%. Economists say the key takeaway is that inflation is spreading more broadly and at clear risk of getting firmly entrenched. They say the inflation rate is expected to climb even higher in the coming months. Well, it will not be cheap to fill up your gas tank as you hit the road this Victoria Day long weekend. Natural Resources Canada says the average national price for regular gasoline hit $2.07 a litre. That's up from $1.34 a litre last May. Now here in Alberta, we're averaging around $1.73 per litre. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau talked about new information showing that inflation in April was the highest it's been in more than 30 years.
I was in Newfoundland and Labrador yesterday to highlight the fact that families in Newfoundland are going to save about $5,000 this year because of what we've done on childcare. We continue to look for ways to support families without adding to the inflationary pressures in the economy. The fact that the Canada Child Benefit and other programs are indexed to the price of inflation, the rising cost of living, is there to support families. It matches in terms of that, but we've also moved forward on historic childcare agreements that are saving thousands of dollars across the country.
Well, we had kind of a mixed bag today, weather-wise, some sunshine, some clouds, and even spotty showers in some regions of southwestern Alberta. Jeanette Rocher is in now with a quick peek at the forecast. Jeanette, more moisture may be on the way?
It sure is, Hal. Now, this should make our farmers happy. Rain beginning in the morning, and a lot of it, too. We're looking at 10 to 15 millimeters of rain into Thursday, with winds from the west gusting at 40 to 60 kilometers per hour. Those rains lasting through Thursday evening into Friday. We're looking at another 60% chance of showers Friday and another 30% chance on Friday evening. So a nice wet start to our long weekend. I'll have all those weekend details for you coming up, though, later on in the show.
Great. Thanks so much, Jeanette. Construction has officially begun on a new recovery center located just east of Lethbridge. The city and the province broke ground on the site Wednesday morning, which will eventually be a place to help people looking to break their addictions. BCN's Angela Stewart has more.
A new 50-bed recovery community located here on Crown land will serve as a long-term treatment facility for those looking for a way out of their addiction and onto a fresh start.
People with addiction are struggling to survive this deadly and progressive illness, while residents are struggling with the impacts that addiction and drugs are having on the cities and the community at large.
As part of the government's recovery plan, and once it's fully operational, the facility will offer a number of different treatment services.
We talk about the continuum of care, right? So we're helping people with whatever challenges they have with their addiction or mental health issues.
Looking behind us here, this is nothing short of amazing.
Mayor Blaine Higgins says a recovery community couldn't have come at a more needed time as the city and the province continues to deal with an opioid crisis.
It gives those the opportunity that are struggling with addiction to find a way back to the lives that they do deserve. And it just wasn't happening before. And so this recovery-based approach is extremely important.
This almost $18 million project, along with similar facilities being built in Red Deer, Gun, and on the Blood Tribe First Nation, will be a first for the province.
Construction on the Lethbridge community site is expected to be completed later this year and will support more than 100 local jobs. For Bridge City News, I'm Angela Stewart.
Now here's a follow-up to a story we first brought you yesterday. The Alberta government invested over $5.3 million into the University of Lethbridge, Lethbridge College, and Medicine Hat College. The money will go towards supporting programs in agriculture, healthcare, science, and IT.
The bulk of the funding is going to strengthen instructional capacity, so bringing on additional faculty, ensuring there's the proper course material that's required. It's not going to physical infrastructure to expand physical facilities. It's for operations.
I think the future of higher education in this province is about collaboration. It's about ensuring that our colleges, our universities, our polytechnics work closely together to maximize our resources as a province, but to also look at the unique contributions that can be made to students by having different institutions contribute to the education of those students.
So these funding opportunities certainly support our growth in key target areas, and working with industry really helps us provide pathways for students, but also helps provide solutions for industry as well.
The U of L will receive $3.2 million, Lethbridge College $1.2 million, and Medicine Hat College will receive $324,000. The Lethbridge Interfaith Food Bank will be hosting a Canada Day celebration this year at Galt Gardens. Now, as part of the July 1st event, locals will be able to enjoy a charity breakfast along with lots of activities. Daniel McIntyre with the Interfaith Food Bank says this celebration is important to help build relationships with organizations that normally support them.
It's about celebrating Canada Day and being part of the community that we are so grateful to have supporting the food bank. Another thing that's really special about Canada Day for us is the partnerships that we build through it. And so we'll be partnering with the radio stations, we'll be partnering with the downtown BRZ to offer picnic in the park and the car clubs and the city itself. We really like to bring people together and celebrate what makes us Canadian.
Should be a lot of fun. McIntyre says they're hoping to have their community stage going up with many local performers performing and a car show offered by the LeBarons Car Club. Baseball is making its way back to Spitz Stadium here in Lethbridge. Now, the Prairie Baseball Academy is entering the Canadian College World Series after finishing in second place during the regular season. As Micah Quinn reports now, the team hammered home what it will take to win the tournament.
Players from the Prairie Baseball Academy gathered for batting practice and fielded a few ground balls on Wednesday morning as they prepared for the Canadian College World Series. This is the 12th season that Todd Hubka has coached the team. He says the staff and players are relaxed going into the tournament.
We've done everything throughout the year. We spent our practices taking care of bunt defense, first and thirds, all that sort of stuff, and it's ingrained in our heads now, so it's just trying to stay relaxed as you can and just get ready for it.
2022 will mark the first Canadian College World Series tournament since 2019. The conference contains 8 teams from Alberta and British Columbia. Catcher Tegan Peranto says it will be exciting to have Lethbridge fans cheering them on.
Yeah, I grew up watching PBA play, coming to all the games, and it's very exciting to finally be a part of this, and I think it'll be a good weekend for us. No, I think it's kind of just the same game plan no matter what, no matter how many people are in the stands, and I'm sure it'll be loud, but we've got to stay composed and stick to the game plan.
The Prairie Baseball Academy will play their first game of the tournament against the Thompson Rivers University Wolfpack on May 19th at 4:30 p.m. at Spitz Stadium. For Bridge City News, I'm Micah Quinn.
The sport of golf can be a lot of fun and quite frustrating, especially when you hit the links and you're dealing with the legendary Lethbridge wind. BCN's Jeanette Rocher caught up with Eric Porter, PGA of Canada head pro at the Lethbridge Country Club, who offer tips when you're golfing in a strong wind.
If we were trying to hit a low golf shot or in the wind, one thing we definitely recommend is club one to two clubs up. And then simply just by placing the ball position back in the stance, what's going to happen is the club's going to hit the ground. We're going to make a shorter follow through, and we're going to be able to hit the ball on a lower trajectory so the wind won't have as much factor. And like I said, definitely club up. A lot of golfers, when it is windy, the biggest mistake that most amateur golfers make is they get up there and, well, the wind's blowing in my face, I'm just going to swing harder. That's the worst thing you could do. You create more spin on the ball, and the wind is going to prevent more curvature.
I'll have to remember that. Eric will have more golfing tips for us coming up in the second half of our program. A First Nation in eastern Alberta says it is researching the deaths of at least 200 residential school children who never came home after some remains were found in unmarked graves. The Saddle Lake Cree Nation says it is checking burial records related to the Bull Quills Indian Residential School located near St. Paul. The community wants Ottawa to provide funding for equipment to investigate further and a wellness plan to help people experiencing renewed trauma. BC First Nation Chief Roseanne Casimir says after taking a year to process the grief through cultural traditions, her First Nation will hold a special day to mark the anniversary of the findings of the unmarked graves.
Today, just wanted to share that on May the 23rd, it is going to be the first anniversary of the confirmation of the finding of the unmarked graves for the missing on the grounds of the Kamloops Indian Residential School, and that we're going to be holding a special day that's going to be through ceremony down at our Powwow Arbor, and it's going to be held from 5 a.m. until 7 p.m. and that the event, the memorial, is going to be open to the public. So, we're going to be welcoming everyone to come and, participate and to be a part of the ceremony as well.
There will be fewer places to camp in Manitoba this May-long weekend as the weather has prolonged the closure of some campgrounds. The St. Malo campground was to fully open this weekend, but some sites are to be closed until June 2nd because of overland flooding. The Manitoba government says some other campgrounds and trails are closed. Travel is also not recommended in Duck Mountain and Nopaming provincial parks because of road washouts. Ontario PC leader Doug Ford earned another union endorsement, but the NDP and Liberals say they're the only ones who have their workers' best interests at heart.
I was so proud to once again welcome the support of LIUNA, the largest construction union in North America. Recently, for the first time ever, the Boilermaker Union endorsed our party. They got behind our plan for the skilled trades.
I can say that unreservedly that I've always been a supporter of working people. They've always been my priority, and I've always been, been a supporter of unions. I don't change my mind about my support for unions and working people. When we've seen Mr. Ford attack unions, we've seen him attack working people many, many times. Conservatives always do that.
So while Mr. Ford and his team talk about benefits to workers that might flow in 2 years or 4 years or 6 years, like the WSIB premiums, the overpayments that they are talking about theoretically flowing back to workers at some distant point in the future, I think their record on who they're for and who they're fighting for and what they're all about is crystal clear for the people.
Prince Charles and his wife Camilla spent the day in Ottawa laying wreaths at Canada's National War Memorial. They also observed a 2-minute silence as part of the Queen's Platinum Jubilee celebrations. The couple showed their support for the people of Ukraine by also attending a prayer service at a Ukrainian church. They then left for the Byward Market, where they shook hands with some of the vendors. U.S. President Joe Biden and First Lady Jill Biden are in Buffalo, New York, to honor the victims of a horrific shooting at a grocery store which claimed 10 lives. The suspect, 18-year-old Peyton Gendron, allegedly planned the mass shooting for months before opening fire at the Tops Market. Police say he was wearing body armor and used a helmet camera to live stream the bloodbath online. He surrendered inside the grocery store and was arraigned on a murder charge. He pleaded not guilty and was jailed under a suicide watch. Now, the store in Buffalo where 10 black people were shot and killed in a shooting rampage was the only supermarket for many miles. Residents are still grappling not only with the attack, but also with being targeted in a place that was so vital to the community.
A lot of us call the east side of Buffalo the historically excluded part of the city.
You can notice the distance that we have to travel. This is what the neighbors have to do. 1, 2, 3, 4 buses just to get to this supermarket. So you see how important that supermarket is on Jefferson.
U.S. authorities this week announced the discovery of an underground smuggling tunnel on the U.S.-Mexican border between San Diego and Tijuana.
According to charges filed today, over the last several days, agents with the agencies that are behind me and that are associated with this investigation have dismantled another elaborate cross-border tunnel. And attorneys from my office are working closely on the prosecution of individuals associated with cocaine, methamphetamine, and heroin seized in connection with this investigation. Today, we have charged 6 people with conspiracy to distribute more than 1,750 pounds of cocaine that was smuggled into the United States. The tunnel stretches from Tijuana, Mexico, to this warehouse in Otay Mesa, about 300 feet north of the border, just east of the Otay Mesa port of entry. It's estimated to be about 1,744 feet long, 61 feet deep, with a diameter of about 4 feet at its widest point. It has reinforced walls, a rail system, and electricity for ventilation.
Wow, that's incredible. Russia says close to 1,000 Ukrainian fighters who had held out inside Mariupol steel plant have now surrendered. They face an uncertain fate, with some being taken by the Russians to a former penal colony in a territory controlled by Moscow-backed separatists. Amnesty International says the Red Cross should be given immediate access to the fighters, but Russia is threatening to put some on trial for war crimes. It is not clear how many fighters now remain inside of the plant's tunnels and bunkers. For the first time since 1991, we have a Battle of Alberta as the Calgary Flames are taking on the Edmonton Oilers. Flames head coach Daryl Sutter says this is a pretty big deal for the NHL.
It's bringing people together. They might cheer for the Oilers, they might cheer for the Flames. Big deal, right? It's a sport. That's what it's about. Like, the best thing ever. The NHL, what more could you ask for right now? You go from 32 to 16, now we're to 8, right? To 8. What more could you ask for? You got 2 teams in Florida, you got 2 teams in Alberta, you got the last 2 teams to win Stanley Cups in Tampa and St. Louis. You got the President's Cup champion for the regular season. You got the conference champion from our side still in it. Like, you look at it, right? It's perfect.
First time in 31 years. It's amazing. We haven't had a Battle of Alberta in over 3 decades. Wow. Well, we had lots of cloud cover today, and those clouds may be bringing some moisture soon as well. How soon? We'll tell you with a full look at the weather forecast in just a moment. It was slightly cooler in many parts of southwestern Alberta, and more of the clouds are rolling in, which also brings the potential of some rain later this week. Jeanette Rocher is in now with all of the weather details. Jeanette, some of that much-needed moisture may arrive by Thursday?
Yes, for sure. Those of us in Lethbridge are going to want to grab an umbrella, a rain jacket, what have you, because for the next couple days, it's going to be pretty wet here in Lethbridge. This should make our farmer friends very happy. Rain's beginning on Thursday, a lot of it too. We're looking at 10 to 15 millimeters. Temperature only a high of 8 degrees on Thursday. Into Friday, we are seeing a 60% chance of showers, showers possibly persisting into Friday night, 30% chance. 9 degrees the high for Friday, kind of a chilly and wet start to our long weekend, but on Saturday, the sun will rise again. The sun will shine again, I should say. 11 degrees the high, 14 the high for Sunday with partly cloudy skies. On our holiday Monday, Victoria Day, 19 degrees the high, and then 18 on a Tuesday with partly cloudy skies. So we are seeing kind of a little bit of a fluctuation in that temperature with the moisture coming in, bringing the cooler temperatures. Average high for this time of year, 19, average low 5. 31 was our high temperature back in 2006, and in 1965 we had our chilliest, which was -3. 5:43 is when the sun rose this morning, and our sun set today at 9:13, giving us exactly 15 and a half hours of a daylight. So on the West Coast, we are seeing some very windy conditions, particularly by the water. 14 degrees the high in Victoria, 13 in Vancouver. Mainly sunny skies in both of those cities, but like I said, windy conditions. In Edmonton, periods of rain and a risk of a thunderstorm in the afternoon. 12 degrees the high, 7 the high in Calgary. We're seeing rain mixed with snow early in the morning, so it's going to be a little bit of a wacky one for Calgary tomorrow. 11 degrees the high in Saskatoon with periods of rain, a chance of showers in Regina tomorrow with the risk of a thunderstorm there. 13 degrees the high, 13 the high also for Winnipeg, and they are looking at showers as well. As we look to the central portion of the country, also seeing very wet conditions here. 22 the high in Toronto. Chance of rain there, looking at showers in Ottawa tomorrow. 17 the high, 14 the high in Montreal with a lot of moisture happening there as well. As we look to the East Coast, we're seeing partly cloudy skies in Fredericton. 16 the high, 17 the high in Halifax, 14 the high in Charlottetown under sunny skies, and 10 the high in St. John's, Newfoundland with 50 km/h wind gusts. So there you have it. That is your forecast.
Stats Canada says the annual inflation rate edged up from 6.7 to 6.8% in April. That's the highest number since 1991. The agency says the rate increased as costs at food stores jumped 9.7% from a year earlier, and gas prices shot up 36.3%. Bank of Montreal chief economist Douglas Porter says the report shows inflation is spreading much more broadly and is at risk of being firmly entrenched. He says that barring a deep dive in oil prices, BMO expects the worst is yet to come on inflation, with the rate staying above 6% for the rest of the year. The Public Service Alliance of Canada says contract talks have stalled with the federal government over wages. Canada's largest federal public sector union says the Treasury Board has offered wage increases averaging 1.75% a year over a 4-year agreement. It says that fails to protect more than 120,000 federal public service workers currently bargaining from surging inflation. The union says it plans to file for conciliation in hopes of reaching a settlement. Home Depot sales improved in its first quarter, even as the chain faced a slower start to spring. The home improvement company raised its full-year guidance as revenue increased 4% to just under $39 billion US. Net earnings increased from $4.1 to $4.2 billion compared to the same quarter last year. Sales at stores open at least a year, which is an indicator of a retailer's health, climbed 2.2%. The Greatest Show on Earth is making a comeback 5 years after shutting down its three-ring circus. Ringling Brothers Barnum and Bailey says their show will go in September of next year, but with just people and no animals. The Florida-based company says it will be interactive and celebrate performers from around the world displaying what it calls incredible feats that push the limits of human potential. It says the tour next year will hit 50 cities across North America. Now, here's a look at today's markets. Stocks suffered their biggest drop in almost 2 years today. Investors were assessing the impact of higher prices on earnings and prospects for monetary policy tightening on economic growth. The TSX was down 389 points in the day to 20,101. The Dow was down 1,164 points to 31,490. The S&P 500 was down 165 points to 3923. And the Nasdaq was down 566 on the day to 11,418. West Texas Intermediate Oil was down 315 to 109.25 US per barrel. Natural gas was down 7 cents to 8.24 US. Gold was up 7 cents to 18.1668 US an ounce, and silver was down a cent to 21.41 US an ounce. Feed wheat is at $16.46 per bushel. Barley's at $10.34. Canola's at $26.19, and corn is at $12.55 per bushel. Live cattle were down $1.50 to $131.50. Feeder cattle were down 133 to 155.85, and lean hogs were up 78 cents to 108.53. The Canadian dollar was down slightly over the past 24 hours to 77.56 US. Recapping one of our top stories, consumers are really feeling the pinch at the gas pumps right now. Gas prices have shot up just over 36% year over year in April. Prices for almost everything at grocery stores have also gone up. Stats Canada says inflation is now at 6.8%. There are many people who believe that you must diversify when it comes to Alberta energy and not put all of your eggs in the oil and gas basket. There are those, including Dr. Calvin Beisner with the Cornwall Alliance, who believe we should look more into nuclear energy. He will explain why shortly.
Well, we live in a generation that believes that climate change is in fact a very real and present danger to our world, and that it's necessary to spend billions of tax dollars to find a solution as quickly as possible. But is this actually true? And if so, are we getting any tangible bang for our buck? Joining us today from Memphis, Tennessee is Dr. Cal Beisner. He is the national spokesperson for the Cornwall Alliance, which is a conservative Christian public policy group. So glad to have you on today, Cal, once again.
Great. Thanks very much. Really good to be with you.
Absolutely. So, Cal, you recently wrote an article in townhall.com about an interview with one of the world's top experts on energy, Václav Smil, which was published in New York Times Magazine. So you say that this kind of dashed a bucket of cold water in the face of millions of climate alarmists. So maybe can you give us a brief overview of what happened?
Yeah, well, what happened was the reporter went to a great expert hoping to get that expert to say what the reporter wanted him to say. But in fact, the expert just simply refused to do it. Václav Smil is really probably one of the world's top one experts on energy, on how we provide energy, how we use energy in our everyday life, how energy is developed and spread around, what are the costs, what are the engineering mechanisms used, all of that stuff. Nobody puts it all together the way Václav Smil does. And so this reporter for the New York Times Magazine contacted him to interview him. And it's actually kind of unusual that Smil even grants an interview. He rarely does. I have a good friend who has an energy blog and an energy podcast who contacted Smil, and Smil wouldn't even do an interview with him. But in this one, perhaps Smil realized, okay, this is with a very, very major media outlet. We'll give it a try. And this reporter basically was trying to get Smil to say, yes, we have this catastrophic problem of climate change facing us, and we absolutely have to switch over rapidly from fossil fuels to wind and solar and other renewables. And Smil just simply refused to do it over and over again. His responses were essentially, look, you're just not being realistic. You're not facing basic facts about where energy comes from, how we take it from its natural form to its useful form. What are the costs of doing that? How long does it take to change an energy infrastructure? And so really it was kind of funny to read this interview, because very clearly the reporter just couldn't get Smil to say what he wanted him to say.
Very interesting indeed. Okay, so obviously this is the mantra that we keep hearing, which is that climate change is presenting an imminent danger to our very existence, and we must act now to save the planet by replacing fossil fuels with renewable green energy sources. So green energy advocates believe that this can be done quickly and without negatively affecting the economy. So how do you see it, Cal?
Well, to quote Smil here from that very interview, he said, people have to realize that this problem is unprecedented because of the numbers, billions of everything, and the pressure of acting rapidly as we never acted before. This doesn't make it hopeless, but it makes it excruciatingly more difficult. Let me give you just one sort of an illustration of that. Uh, Over the period of roughly 2008 to 2016, solar energy received 3,500 times as much in the way of subsidies and tax incentives from the US government as did any of the fossil fuels, coal, oil, natural gas. Nevertheless, today solar provides under 1% of all the electricity generated in the United States, and electricity is only a small part of the total energy used in the United States. So those people who think, oh yeah, we're going to just make enough solar panels, we're going to put up enough wind turbines to replace all the energy we get from coal, oil, and natural gas, they're nuts. Wind and solar together today produce less than 3% of all the energy used in the United States. On a worldwide basis, they produce less than 1% of all the energy used. And fossil fuels provide roughly 85% of all the energy used. Run-of-river hydro in huge dams provides a fair amount. Nuclear provides a fair amount. You put those together with fossil fuels, you're well over 95%, and then you actually have wood and dry dung providing more energy than wind and solar.
Wow, it sounds like we would need a whole ton of solar panels all across the world. These are just developing nations too. So realistically, how long would it take for the many, many developing nations of the world to get to a place of having sufficient green energy to function on? And who would actually pay for that, considering they have much higher priorities, such as providing proper health care and food for their citizens?
Yeah, the answer to how long is forever. There was a really interesting article just recently, actually a paper, a refereed paper, asking, would it be possible to provide all of the electricity for Germany with solar panels in Spain, Spain having the best sun conditions of any place in Europe? And the answer was no. That first of all, we don't have enough of the very rare earths and precious metals necessary for making solar panels to produce that many solar panels just for the use of Germany, let alone for all the countries all around the world to produce their electricity that way. But second, we don't have enough land. It takes hundreds of times as much land space covered with solar panels to produce the same amount of energy as you need from either as the land needed from using either nuclear or natural gas or coal. And so we just simply don't have that much land available. And that's the kind of point that Smeal makes. I mean, this is a man who's written more than 40 books in this field, teaches at university in Canada, and he came out of what used to be Czechoslovakia, now Czech Republic and Slovak Republic. But he came out of there, grew up under communism, and he knew what it was to have a government that simply said, this is what we're going to do, and it doesn't matter whether the market works, doesn't matter whether the real world works that way. And he just refuses to bow down to the prevailing narrative.
Mm-hmm. Now, that New York Times interviewer asked Smeal if there aren't maybe credible pathways to decarbonizing the grid. So what was his reply to that?
Well, yeah, Smeal said, Germany, after nearly $500 billion, in 20 years, they went from getting 84% of their primary energy from fossil fuels to getting 76%. Can you tell me, and I'm still quoting Smeal here, can you tell me how you'd go from 76% fossil to zero by 2030 or 2025? I'm sorry, the reality is what it is. Now, I'll add to that. Germany was picking the low-hanging fruit in these first 20 years and spending $500 billion. They took the easiest parts of their energy infrastructure to replace with wind and solar. primarily wind for Germany, because Germany just doesn't get that terribly much sun. But they took the easier parts. For the next, say, let's see, they went from 84 to 76%, so 12% drop in fossil fuels. For the next 12%, they're going to be working on the harder fruit to reach, higher up on the tree. That's going to cost more. For the following 12%, it's going to cost even more than that. So this is just simply not realistic at all. The Biden administration in the United States wants us to go to net zero by 2050 and to 50% reduction in carbon dioxide emissions by 2030. It's not going to happen. I mean, my own article, I closed up with a quote from Thomas Robert Malthus, the originator of Malthusianism, the notion that the world is overpopulated and we're running out of resources and we have to contain population, which is itself wrong. And he admitted it in the third edition of his work. But, well, first edition is what's famous. But some 200 years ago, Malthus wrote, "What cannot be done will not be done," which seems to me to make good sense.
Mm-hmm. It was interesting. Now, Cal, to be fair, many, of course, argue that setting green goals is a necessary thing if you want to achieve them at some point. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, as Smeal put it in response to this interviewer, it's not helpful to set goals that cannot be met. It's not helpful to set purely idealistic goals. Goals need to be at least plausibly reachable in order for them to motivate actual hard work and action to achieve them. And Smeal is saying, no, the goals that are being set, whether it's 50% reduction by 2030 or net zero by 2050, the goals are being set are simply not possible. And what that means is that as people fail to achieve them, as they fail to get the impossible done, then they lose hope. And hope is essential to humanity making major achievements. So if you want to destroy hope, you set unreachable goals, then you fail to reach them, and people give up. That's not what we want.
Interesting. Now, getting back to Smeal for a moment here, Smeal states that developing countries actually need to increase and not decrease their use of fossil fuels to build their infrastructures, right? So can you explain why you believe that this is the case?
Well, in a lot of developing countries, the primary source of energy for the large majority of people is either wood or dried dung. That's especially the case in sub-Saharan Africa, where under 20% of the people have access to electricity. And even those who do have it only on an intermittent basis. It's not reliable, and most can't afford it. So when you've got people using wood and dried dung as their primary energy source, you realize what this means is indoor air pollution from the smoke of the fires over which they cook their food. It means huge problems with respiratory disease and like. The World Health Organization years ago calculated that this is killing between 2 and 4 million people every year. And those places, frankly, you could build the world's dirtiest coal-fired power plant right next to the hut of some family that's been burning wood and dried dung to cook its food and heat the hut overnight. And that family would be much better off from the electricity generated by that plant than it is from the tiny bit of energy that it gets from the wood and dried dung. It would have far less pollution, and it would have all the things that electricity can do for you that mere heat can't. So what really needs to happen is that the developing world has to go from the primitive energy system, which my friend Dr. John Christie, a climatologist who used to be a missionary in Nigeria, I think it was, said the primitive energy system is wood and dried dung carried on the backs of sub-Saharan African women, average 6 to 8 hours per woman per day spent just doing that. We need to go to the modern energy system, which is electricity generated by coal and natural gas or nuclear or even oil generating stations. That cleans their lives and it provides them the energy that is indispensable to their rising and staying out of poverty.
My goodness. Okay, so really quickly, looking into the future, where are we going to be 20 years from now?
Well, I will probably not still be alive by then, but my guess is that we will still be, the world will still be getting at least 80% of its energy from fossil fuels 20 years from now, unless, of course, the opposition to nuclear dissipates a great deal, in which case nuclear is far and away the safest energy source that we have. And it's the cleanest energy source that we have, with the possible exception of run-of-river hydro. And that could make a difference. The problem is you're going to have a huge change in the attitude of the environmentalist movement toward nuclear to do that. Barring that, fossil fuels are going to continue to be the primary energy source for the world for at least the next 50 or 60 years, probably the next 100 years or more.
I guess time will tell. Hopefully you'll be around to see it. As will I, all of us. Okay, that's all the time we have for today. Thanks so much for being with us, Cal.
Thank you very much. Have a wonderful afternoon.
Dr. Cal Beisner is the national spokesperson for the Cornwall Alliance, a conservative Christian public policy group. Well, I think all of us have some stories we could share about conflicts we have experienced at work. Sometimes we even dread going to work because of the stress that we know that's waiting there for us. Joining us today to learn how to better deal with this is Dr. Paul White. He's a psychologist, a consultant, and co-authors of a new book. Actually, not such a new book, but Making Things Right at Work, which is available at appreciationatwork.com. Welcome to Bridge City News, Dr. White. This book sounds like such a success. We were talking a little bit offline there, and it's such an interesting topic. So conflict in the workplace, this is an area you specialize in. In fact, it's, in my opinion, one of the most asked questions in job interviews. So how do you deal with conflict in the workplace?
Well, there's a lot of different things you can do because there's different kinds of conflict. And in fact, some people don't connect with the word conflict as much as tension or friction, that they sort of don't feel like, well, I'm not in a fight. But a lot of it has to do with some very simple kinds of things like miscommunication between people that, I thought you were going to call that client yesterday and you thought I was, and we come today and we realize nobody did, and, have to deal with that. Or different expectations about situations, about whether, you pulled off an event and one person thinks it went pretty well, and then another person thinks that, boy, we left a lot that still could be done better. And so it's there. We're people, we make mistakes, we don't communicate real well. And so really, I've found that it's more important for business leaders to not focus so much on avoiding conflict, but building tools on how to deal with it once it's there.
Now, we were chatting, you co-authored this book with, is it Gary Chapman? He's the author of The 5 Love Languages. So maybe talk about how that came to be.
Yeah, so I consult with family-owned businesses and deal with the relational issues there. And in doing so, found that family members, I had one father said, I think the plan for succession is going well. And the son said, it's a disaster. I can't ever please my dad. And there was a gap there. And so, I thought, well, maybe the 5 love languages could apply to work. So I approached Dr. Chapman, and 10 years ago, we wrote that book, The 5 Languages of Appreciation in the Workplace. And it's been used by lots of companies, and we have an online assessment that goes with it. And then over time, we've written on toxic workplaces, and then this one on, sort of the practical ways to help deal with conflict at work.
It's such a meaty topic, and one that unfortunately doesn't seem to go away, does it? So businesses actually hire you to come and teach their leaders and staff how to resolve conflict in the workplace. But You obviously can't be everywhere at the same time. So can reading this book potentially change an entire work environment?
Well, I think the key word is potentially. Just reading the book probably won't, but reading it and then applying some of the concepts clearly can. And that's one of the cool things that we've, been able to help organizations. A few weeks ago, we had a feature article written on our work in the New York Times in the Sunday business section. And so it works. And some of it is just real practical kinds of things, like be direct in your communication versus indirect, in the sense that you tell people what you think in a kind way, but don't try to go around people, or don't tell somebody else to send a message, or don't gossip, because that just sort of creates an untrusting kind of environment. And the other thing is lots of times when we have a tense situation, we react real quick and sort of shoot our mouth off, or get too angry. And another practical thing is just to slow down, just take a breath, sort of wait, maybe ask a question of clarifying and say, I'm sort of confused. I thought we were doing this, but I'm hearing this now. So can you explain that to me? And just really sort of basic listening, active listening skills, communication skills can really help keep things from getting out of control.
It could potentially avoid that blow up, right? Because many of us probably tend to express anger in different forms when we run into that conflict with that coworker, so that's good advice there. Stop and reassess, take a breath, and maybe just ask them for clarification. Great advice. So a lot of employees say that they don't feel appreciated of their hard work. So how can managers and coworkers learn how to show appreciation more effectively?
Yeah, and that's really the key to the 5 languages of appreciation. One is that a lot of people confuse appreciation and employee recognition, which can be a good thing if it's done right, but recognition is largely about performance. We believe appreciation includes that, but it's about the person, because we're not just work units, right? We're not just sort of production units, but we're people. We have lives, and we have characteristics that are valuable beyond production. I like to work with cheerful people more than grumpy people. And so, I can call attention to that, to a team member who's got a nice smile and a great laugh. And the other part is that when people hear the word appreciation, they think mainly about words, saying thanks or giving a compliment. But our research, and we've had over 350,000 people take our online assessment, finds that, people want to be appreciated in different ways. There's words, there's quality time, which could be individual time, or it could be hanging out with your colleagues and friends. An act of service can be when you're working on a really tough project, time limited, what somebody can do to help you get through that. Tangible gifts is another language. It's not bonuses and raises, but it's just small things that show that you're getting to know your colleague. So like their favorite cup of coffee, or maybe a magazine. If they're going to plant a garden, you say, hey, I know you're going to do that. I thought you might enjoy this. And then even physical touch. And physical touch is the one that people, we're going to get sued.
Especially in the workplace, right?
Well, yeah. But what we found is physical touch is just spontaneous celebration, right? It's a high five when you finish a project. It's a fist bump when you solve a problem, and can be a congratulatory handshake. But it's interesting that over half of the employees that we've assessed want a different language than words. Words is sort of the big one. It's still about 45% of the employees, but if you only use words, you're going to miss the mark. And so we've created an assessment as well as a book, and then some training materials to help leaders and colleagues communicate it, because it's not just top down from leaders, it includes colleagues as well.
Yeah, that's interesting. So really, you really are going through those 5 love languages, like what a couple would do with the acts of service and the words of affirmation and stuff. So really, those can almost be applied to almost any relationship in our lives then, can't they?
Absolutely, absolutely. And they look different at work than they do in personal relationships with friends and family. And that's why with our assessment, and people that maybe know what their personal love language is, actually their language of appreciation may be different because of the setting and context. And in our assessment, we identify the specific actions that a person wants, because quality time is a really important one. In the old days, those are older, it meant time with your supervisor or manager. But more and more for younger workers, they want to hang out with their friends and colleagues, go out to lunch, go out afterwards. And so you could get the right language, but miss the action and still sort of miss the target.
Okay, that's interesting. Now, how often do we make assumptions about others at work or about a particular situation? And why does this tend to cause problems?
Well, unfortunately, it seems like we do a lot. And the assumption is about their motivation of why they did something versus sort of giving them the benefit of the doubt. Unfortunately, we sort of attribute negative motivations that, maybe a person's criticizing the event that we helped, lead. And you say, man, you say to yourself, at least, they're trying to throw me under the bus and make me look bad. When in actuality, they may just want to make it better next time. And, it's hard enough. We usually have mixed motives ourselves. Our motives usually aren't totally pure. And so it's hard enough to figure out our own motivation, let alone somebody else's. And so we really encourage people to give sort of the benefit of the doubt, ask questions, figure out what's up, and don't overreact for sure.
That's a really good point. I could see how those assumptions could happen, especially in a work environment where there may be competition, right? Those competitive environments, I could see how that could completely happen.
One of the key sort of concepts that we believe is that, employees are people. And the way that we get along better often is to get to know the person, because usually there's some touchstones and touch points where we can identify and understand them better so that we're not just totally guessing and coming from our own perspective solely.
Yeah, great advice. How about communication? What kinds of miscommunication can cause conflict, and how can we improve on this?
It's interesting. As a psychologist, I used to teach master's level counselors. It's the same skills we teach counselors, and it's what's called active listening. And it's that simple thing of when you hear somebody say something, before you respond, especially if it's sort of a large amount of information, it's good to summarize and say, okay, so you're saying, that from your perspective, the event went okay. There's some things that we can improve and, maybe plan ahead more or whatever. And so then they have the opportunity to clarify, because lots of times we assume we hear correctly, that we've heard everything. And also, those of us that are speaking don't always communicate our thoughts clearly. We may say it a little different than what we're thinking. And so just having that pause to say, is this what you're saying? And then move
kind
forward.
of fill in the gaps there.
Exactly. It can really smooth a lot of things out.
Okay, so you write that good character and integrity is crucial for a healthy workplace. So what do you mean by this, and why is it so important?
Well, we found that to build trust in relationships, there's really three important things, and there's C's. One is competence. If you're going to trust somebody in the workplace, you got to believe that they're going to be able to do the task. Secondly, consistency, that they're going to show up or they're going to do it, get it done on time, maybe in the right quality level. And then character. And in this sense, we're talking about character of integrity, of, following through on what you agreed to. But really, trust is also built that you believe that the other person's looking out for your interests as well as their own, so that they're not just using this to manipulate it so that they look good and you look bad. And so we find that it's really important to demonstrate that you say what you mean, and that as you work together on a team, you consider other people's interests and perspectives too, because we almost always think that our way is right. But it's not always the only right way or the only piece that we need to consider.
Here's a big one. So when we mess up at work,
that never happens.
It never happens. Everybody at one point in time has messed up at work. So how do we deal with that? It can sometimes be challenging to own up to it. So should we apologize for anything and everything that goes wrong, or how do we know what warrants an apology exactly?
Yeah, I think, no, we shouldn't apologize for anything and everything. And some people do, and it sort of gets in the way, right? But I think when we've done something or not done something that created some negative event or consequence, either to the organization or to some of our teammates, I think it's reasonable to consider apologizing. And the first thing is just to accept responsibility and say, I didn't do that the way I should have. Sorry about that. And part of that is, sort of being sorry for the negative consequences. You don't have to take full responsibility for everything, because that's usually not the case. But you say, man, I'm sorry that I was late in getting this, and I see how it created some stress for you. And just starting there, and our colleague, Dr. Jennifer Thomas and Dr. Chapman have written a book, The 5 Languages of Apology, and there's a fuller way to apologize. But if you at least start with those, accept responsibility, and sort of say, I'm sorry for the negative results that happened, it's a good way to get going at least.
All right. Well, it looks like we are out of time, but thanks so much for being with us today, Dr. White. Appreciate having you on.
You bet. My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Dr. Paul White is one of the authors of the new book, Making Things Right at Work, which is available at appreciationnetwork.com. I'm Jeanette Roche on behalf of all of us here at Bridge City News. Thanks for watching.